Hi everybody. Thanks for tuning in again. Very exciting. It's my second video. I appreciate so much the support up till now, the positive feedback and comments. It honestly has kind of pushed me to do this. I was so anxious the first video. I did not know how it was going to go. Just was incredibly nervous at the reception, and it has been so positive from XJWs kind of across platforms and people who were not ever a JW but maybe have people in their family, or they knew, or they're just like cult curious, like I like to call it. So I, first of all, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for that support. Honestly, I hope the momentum keeps up, and feel free to tell me if there are certain things you want to hear more about. But I also ask to be a little bit patient. I do have a lot of things in mind and the way that I want to tell the story. So I am going to get there. I'm going to go basically through my whole life, as the first video talked about, some of the trials and tribulations and successes, but I certainly am not going to be able to cram it all into one or two videos. So just hang in there with me, and hopefully each video brings a little something new or a little nugget that helps you to understand me and or people in your life that have a similar experience. With that said, I would like to start this video by showing you a little bit of my start of being indoctrinated. So I have this picture. Hopefully you can see it. I'm going to try to post it too in the comments. But sorry, there's a little glare. So this is me. That's baby Johanna right there. And I am sitting in a stroller at the convention the year of, the summer of the My Book of Bible Stories being released. So this was released at the convention, and then I am reading it in my stroller. Okay? So that shows you how early on I was starting to be heavily indoctrinated. I mean, I think probably before that, right? When I was in the womb, I'm sure my mom was reading to me out of something that was child-oriented, but she always said it was a blessing from Jehovah that I was so young when this Bible storybook came out, because it's just what she needed to help me to be, the perfect witness child. This book, if you do not know it, you can, I think, still find it online in some places to buy. We, in the XJW community, jokingly refer to it as My Book of Horror Stories, because the content is supposed to be for children, but it really isn't. So, I mean, I think, you start out and you kind of enjoy it because Beautiful starts showing you the Garden of Eden, right? This lovely picture. Fast forward like 3 stories and 4 stories maybe. Then you meet Cain and Abel in all their bloody glory. That's a little taste of the stuff that's in there, and I will talk about a lot more of that later and how some of it genuinely impacted me. But what I wanted to share today is a couple of ironies, and people wonder, how can you be a Jehovah's Witness? Like, how could you stay in it so long? Or why do people go back? Or why don't they just leave? And cult indoctrination is real. And although I will spend some time at some point talking about things, like more details of things, I think an excellent way of understanding it is to understand the BITE model, BITE, and you can just Google it. I'll talk about that more later. That was a real eye-opener for me when I was waking up. But the trick is, and especially nowadays, because of the internet, you gotta start young. So you have this picture of me, right? And I'm in a stroller at a convention, like reading this book that's designed for children. And it was all downhill from there. It was a constant bombarding. So the funny thing is, when I was young, my mom she was kind of like interested in some psychology stuff. I think she tried to understand certain things so she knew how to address people of different personalities in the ministry. I think that was her objective, honestly. But the one thing that she kind of learned in her study about psychology, and she used to talk about this all the time, she was like, you know how you see some people and they just like, they play their TV all day long, and when they're in the car or in the bathtub or like whatever, they'll maybe have the radio on. She's like, they just have to have noise, like constant noise. And even rarely do they read. They just have to have this like media going, this noise, because as soon as they shut it off, they're left with their own thoughts, and those own thoughts are maybe negative or heavy, and they just don't want to deal with it. She was describing what it was like growing up and or being a zealous Jehovah's Witness. Like, that is what they do. They have things, they would have their things on, back then it was on tape. So like their music on tape, different talks on tape, and you could just play it in the car. But then also we had, 3 big meetings a week. We had a meeting on Sunday mornings that was from 9:30 to just before 12, and then you were expected to go in field service after that. Then on Tuesday nights, you had another meeting that started at 7 at night. For us, it started at 7. I think it was different times other places. And then it lasted until 9, unless you were like an elder in their family. The elders would meet after that meeting, and sometimes families would be stuck at the Kingdom Hall waiting on their dad/husband until like midnight. Oh, it's crazy. And then on Thursdays, we had what we called the book study, which was another meeting that was from 7 to 8 o'clock at night in somebody's home. That was a smaller setting. It was a small group of people that went to the same congregation that would all meet at different houses. But then you had to like study and prepare for all those meetings, which was not like, there was quite a bit of the literature you had to read, look up the corresponding scripture, underline what they had. Interesting thought about that. You weren't actually studying, you were just deeply indoctrinating yourself, because they've shown that if you just repeat a message over and over, that's how it sticks in the brain. And so you would read these paragraphs and it would ask a question, and you couldn't really like try to figure out the question on your own. You had to go back through that paragraph and find the answer to the corresponding question. So you were just highlighting the same words you just read, and then you could only really read the scripture that they had cited. Sometimes they'd have some cross-reference scriptures, but nothing out beyond that. If you wanted to do some deep studying, you could take whatever topic that they were talking about in that paragraph. Let's say they were talking about Noah's Ark, okay? But the only resources you could cross-reference or read more about that account were, spoiler alert, more Jehovah's Witness books. You couldn't like go get a book from the library or the Catholic encyclopedia. You had to only use Jehovah's Witness literature. So we used to have bookcases, because this was pre-internet. We had floor-to-ceiling, I'm not kidding, bookcases full of the bound volumes of Watchtower and Awake magazines, the Insight books, like every book ever published by Jehovah's Witnesses, I think, was in our house almost at one point, which I regret now. I wish I had, because I could pull a Lloyd Evans and point some stuff out to them. But I don't. I just have a very small library for now. We'll see how that goes. Off topic. So that would be like your week. And then you had field service. So you had these 3 meetings that were long. You had to study for all of them. Then you had field service. They recommended an average person go door to door at least 10 hours a month. So that meant families, like with a husband, wife, and kids, would spend like every single Saturday in field service, because that would be the only day that, both mom and dad would have off work. And so, like, all my peers, none of them had like Saturday morning cartoons. They had to get up early and go meet for field service. And so my family, we did that, but since my mom was overzealous, I was raised not just with that, but then on top of it, field service every day during the week, because we were pioneering by the time I was 12. That 90 hours a month, door to door. So that's how they do it. It's just constant bombardment. And then on top of it, you would have 2 assemblies a year, which that's when a bunch of different congregations in the same region meet together for a Saturday and a Sunday at the same spot, and they have all day long from like 9:45 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, just talk after talk after talk after talk from the stage. So it was like one big, public talk that you had on Sundays, but it was for 2 full days. That was twice a year. And once a year in the summer, when I was real little, we had conventions, and that's when you had even more congregations, kind of almost half your state, all the Kingdom Hall congregations would meet together. And that, when I was young, was 4 days. So that was the standard. It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and same thing, all day long. But when I got older, they shrunk it to 3 days. So it was just Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but it was still annual and in the summer. I will give a shout out, though. My mom, bless her heart, she used to, when we would have those conventions, we used to camp rather than stay in a hotel. And so as soon as we would leave, we'd go to the campsite, and just like all that pent up energy from sitting all day, she would let us just go run wild through the campsite. Like they had playgrounds and that sort of thing. Sometimes some of them we stayed at would have like a beach, so we'd swim, just burn off the energy, and then we'd have a big campfire. A lot of times different witnesses from the area would come out to visit us at the campsite, because that was like all the fun. So the conventions for us growing up, it actually wasn't horrible, because we had that like highlight. And then too, that was like when you were a teenager and stuff, that's when you got to meet up with some of your friends that maybe you only wrote letters with, because remember, I'm pre-internet. And so that part, and then you would just like walk around during lunch break and check out the cuties. But you weren't old enough to date, so you couldn't exchange phone numbers. So I couldn't anyways. I was such a good kid. So that was kind of like a day in the life. They just constantly bombard you and suck up all your time and energy, so you didn't really have, especially then, right? Like we didn't have internet, didn't have cell phones, didn't have computers, so we couldn't just like doodle around on them in our free time and find apostate sites. Like back then, if you wanted to like research what you were learning or spend your time doing something else, it was like it took effort, and you just didn't have the time, and you didn't even know where to start. If you would have told me when I was like 17, like go find an apostate book, how would I know? So that's how you get, at that time, like it becomes who you are. The witnesses themselves, this is the other thing I was asked. I'll do a brief overview. I think most of you know what they teach, but in case you don't, Jehovah's Witnesses believe that there is one God, Jehovah, hence the name. And then he did have his son Jesus, and his son Jesus came to earth and died and gave his life as a sacrifice. That's pretty standard, like Christian religion ideals. They believe in creation. They don't believe that things were created in the actual 7 days, but they do believe humans have only been here for 6,000 years, and they don't believe in evolution. So I'll get into all that someday, maybe. But so that's again standard, Christian ideals. They believe in no premarital sex of any kind. So even self-pleasure, no talking even to the opposite sex too long if you don't plan on marrying them. You can't date until you're ready to get married. Of course, no homosexuality, nothing even close to or related to that. They're very, unfortunately, a lot of conservative Christians hung up on the sex thing. I wouldn't have even thought about it that much if it wasn't constantly being talked about in gross detail sometimes about things you couldn't do, including what married people could not do together. It's so bizarre. So, so there's that part. They do not believe in a burning hellfire. They believe that when you die, you're just dead. However, you live on in the memory of God. And that's important because they believe that very soon, one day, Armageddon is going to come. Armageddon is when Jesus comes back to the earth, commits mass genocide, and kills every man, woman, child that is not a baptized witness of his. So even people who have the same Christian beliefs, but don't call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses and haven't been baptized, they will be destroyed at Armageddon. The only people left will be Jehovah's Witnesses, which, there are 8 million of them now around the earth. So the number's shrinking every day, but right now that's about how many there are, last I knew. And so then the witnesses that are left are going to start working to make the earth a paradise. As they do that, the people who died before, from Abel to just before Armageddon, so anyone who'd ever lived on the earth who hadn't been killed at one point by God directly, so none of the people from Noah's flood, none of the people from Sodom and Gomorrah, none of the people from Armageddon, all those people would stay dead forever. But everyone else is going to be resurrected on the earth. The only footnote to this is that there are 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses that when they die, they're the special elite little flock of witnesses. They will go to heaven and they're going to rule with Jesus. So some people hear that number and they think witnesses believe only 144,000 people are saved, but that's not the case. They believe only 144,000 people go to heaven and everyone else is going to be on earth. They're going to make the earth a paradise again. They're going to bring back God's going to resurrect these people. They're going to live on earth. Everybody's going to reach perfection. Again, so Adam and Eve were, supposedly, they're going to be perfect. And they're going to live forever and ever and ever and ever on earth and never die. It's a short version. So that was the goal. All the animals would become tame. Humans would all get along with each other. There'd be one universal language. Everyone would worship Jehovah. There'd be no devil, no terrible influence. So that was their goal. And in the meantime, they try to live as much of that perfect life as possible. Hence the no cigarette smoking, no marijuana, no any kind of drug. Supposed to be no over drinking. Jehovah's Witnesses have the highest rate of alcoholism of anyone you'll ever meet. They're supposed to be real nice to each other all the time and all loving. Jehovah's Witnesses have an extremely high abuse internally. So they're supposed to be, as do all the things as close to perfection as possible, so that they can be worthy. And on top of that, they have to do those other things, like attend all the meetings and study for all the meetings and preach as much as possible, because even if they're doing, like, living as good of a life as they can, but they're not doing all those other things as much as they could, then they might be destroyed at Armageddon. So it's a constant threat of Armageddon. They believe Armageddon is coming at any time. It's gotten very intense through the pandemic. They are a doomsday cult. They call themselves a happy people, and they always talk about how happy they are. Growing up, looking back on it and realizing that you were just full of guilt and fear constantly, like afraid you were going to say the wrong thing, afraid you were going to stumble somebody, afraid that you weren't like the perfect Jehovah's Witness, and because of that you were afraid that if something happened and Armageddon came, you were going to die. I mean, plain and simple. That's it. So very, very dark. But they flip it. The way they get other people to join, number one, is they love people with trauma, because those people oftentimes with untreated trauma are very susceptible, because they're searching for something to make them feel better. And when you've lost a husband or a child or a wife or a best friend or a parent or a sibling or somebody that's really close to you in death, Jehovah's Witnesses love that. They pounce on it, and they use that as a reason to objectify your trauma and suck you in. And that's a slippery slope for many. I did it, ashamed of it, but I did, and that's just the way they operate. And that's how they continue to get people to still sign up for it. And then, they love bomb you. You show up at the meetings, and they're just so nice to you, and they're so kind, and they're really nice people to have as a neighbor or a worker, because they do work hard, and because they're constantly trying to set that example, right? They're trying to make people think like, I'm extra because I'm a Jehovah's Witness. It's not really honestly like them as a person. They're doing it as a representation of this bigger picture. They're doing it to say, oh, I'm like this because of this organization. But behind closed doors, and or as soon as people are baptized and in the organization, the scales start to fall off the eyes and people start to see things more clearly. But, you make excuses then, and you're already in, and if you leave, then, you're going to lose your whole network. It's very tricky, and there's a lot to all of that. And then on top of it, for me anyways, you will add being female and being in the organization. You just do not have much of a voice at all. And if you do raise a concern or a complaint, which I'll talk about later when I talk about my actual abuses, they are minimized or ignored. And so you are then in turn made to feel not important, not just not important, but like you're a bad person for even bringing it up in the first place. So as a woman, you're not allowed to be behind the platform and give talks either. You can like be on the stage for these little mock presentation things they do, but you're not allowed to like lead the congregation in any kind of teaching. So they talk about how women are precious like a Tiffany lamp, because a Tiffany lamp is expensive and you want to cherish it and take care of it in case it's broken because it's so delicate. That is like the most backhanded compliment you can ever receive. And it took me years to realize that. Like, I am not overly delicate. I do not have to be treated differently than, you don't have to tell me things in a different way or dumb it down or water it down. Like, I can handle it. I can understand things and explain things. But when you're already like in a cult, and then on top of it, you're a woman, it's really, really hard to find your place and to find your way out. So I'm proud of any other woman who's done so. I really, really am. And we have got this. Like I said in my last video, we're going to be the ones to continue to shine a light. My next few videos, I do want to talk more about my personal experience, but I thought for now that would just give you an overview of the witnesses themselves, and then, the hierarchy, the way they're set up. I mentioned before, like, there's the governing body, which the governing body are 8 men, always American. They always have been. They are in New York City at the headquarters, which they term Bethel. Those 8 men are claimed to be part of that 144,000 group that's going to go to heaven. So they're like the elite of the elite leaders. And then below them are the people that are at Bethel who kind of do all the work, responding to letters, writing some of the publications, all that like technical work. And then you have different levels of overseers. So you have like district overseers. That's a man, and he's almost always married. And he oversees like all the congregations in one big part of the United States. And then right below him is a circuit overseer, and they oversee a smaller group of congregations in a state, usually in one single state. They come and visit those congregations throughout the year, so you get to know the circuit overseer a little bit more. Then you have the elders, and the elders are the ones who are the leaders within that congregation. Those are just guys who work a normal job. They haven't gone to some kind of like special Bible training. They're only trained by the witness organization. They don't go to any kind of other Bible scholar programs at all. They usually work like a full-time job. So they're just a guy, but because they're male, because they're baptized and they're leading like a good life, they will then be appointed as an elder to lead the congregation, enforce the rules, sometimes make up their own, and no women can have that role. And that's who you're supposed to go to for counsel. And they're not like marriage counselors. They don't have any psychology training normally. They're like a guy who runs a construction business who is supposed to be your go-to for everything in the Kingdom Hall. So that's the elders. Then you have the ministerial servants, who are like the helpers to the elders. And that's usually younger men who, it's right before they become an elder. That's like their training ground. And then you have pioneers, who can be men or women. It's usually women because they have more time to go door to door. And then you have publishers, and that's just a standard person who's in the organization. So that's kind of the way that it's ranked. And I just mention that because as I refer to different people, I'll talk about experiences with district overseers and people at Bethel in my stories. And so this hopefully helps you understand or picture where that comes from. I could go on and do even more with this video, but I just wanted to take a little time to show you baby Johanna, and that's where it started. And I'm embarrassed and proud of myself for getting out and being out and speaking out, and I hope you are too. I apologize if you heard my hungry pups in the background. Fair warning, you're probably gonna hear them again. So if you don't like dogs, shame on you. I'm kidding. If you don't like dogs, I'm sorry. You're gonna probably see or hear them more. That's it. I hope everybody has a wonderful cult-free day, and I will hopefully talk to you and see you soon. Ciao for now.